Puffins are maybe one of the cutest birds ever, and people in Iceland are throwing them off a cliff. We'll tell you why on a brand new episode of The Internet Says It's True. Welcome back to The Internet Says It's True, where every week we learn something that sounds made up but is really true, part of the WCBE podcast experience, available on all podcast platforms, as well as the NPR app and website. My name's Michael Kent. This is episode 222. Triple Twos. We got a new guest coming on later in the show, comedian Becky Braunstein. So that's coming up in the second half of the podcast. I got a few messages recently from listeners about future topics, and that's just the coolest thing. I really appreciate that. So thank you to Dane and to Charlotte, who both sent me messages this week about stories they want to hear on the show. If you want to join the community of listeners, you can do that over on Patreon. It's patreon.com/Michael Kent. When you join up, you become a Tizzitor. You're joining the best place to chat about episodes with other listeners. You can watch videos that you can only see there and listen to ad-free episodes. You can join at any level. There's even a free trial if you want. And once again, that's patreon.com/Michael Kent.
I am once again asking for your financial support.
Yeah, Bernie. I got a message from Chris the other day who said he loves his Internet Says It's True t-shirt. Chris says every time I wear it, I get comments, usually from people who don't realize it's a podcast, but love the saying and think it's funny. Thank you, Chris. We'll take that too. But it's a great conversation starter, and because you listen to the show, you have hundreds of interesting facts to hit those people with. Get your merch at theinternetsaysitstrue.com. Just click merch and you can find t-shirts and mugs there.
I gotta get that t-shirt.
So let's get into this week's story and talk all about puffins. There aren't too many places you can go to see puffins. Some people call them the clown of the sea because of the colorful markings on their beak. They're a black and white bird with bright orange webbed feet and beautiful colorful markings on that beak. Most of our listeners are in North America, so if you want to see them without leaving the continent, your options are basically either Nova Scotia, where they inhabit a few tiny islands near Cape Breton, Newfoundland, or a couple islands off the coast of Maine. And then there are a few out near Alaska, but that's a completely different type of puffin. We're talking about the Atlantic Puffin, and most of them live in the cold northern waters of Greenland, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, Norway, the Faroe Islands, and the largest population in Iceland. And that's where our story centers, because in Iceland, people are throwing young puffins off a cliff. Occasionally, humans who have encroached on an animal's habitat will really disrupt the behavior and threaten their ability to thrive. And in some of those instances, measures have been taken to sort of reverse this damage. For example, in Florida, North Carolina, and a few other places on the American East Coast, human activity, namely city lights, have confused hatching sea turtles. The natural behavior of these turtle hatchlings is, once they're born, to crawl toward the moonlight that's bouncing off the ocean. But in human-populated areas, this can confuse the hatchlings because of the light pollution, and they can crawl the wrong way. So to offset this, there are light restrictions near known hatching areas and also shades that keep the light from leaking onto the beach. And then there are human walls where local people will line either side of the turtle's pathway to the beach to help guide them. This has led to a huge improvement in the number of disoriented and lost turtles. In Alaska, caribou migration routes have been severely impacted by roads and oil pipelines. As a mitigation measure, engineers designed specifically designated caribou corridors and crossings that allow the caribou to safely travel between feeding and calving areas. And some of these are even highway overpasses that are simply just grass-covered bridges for wildlife only. There are tons of examples of these. There's actually a section of Reddit called Humans Being Bros that often includes stories just like these. Some are indirect engineering feats, like the caribou corridors in Alaska, and similar corridors, like the ones created for pronghorns of Yellowstone. It also includes things like salmon ladders to help salmon travel upstream where their migration routes have been interrupted by things like hydroelectric dams and road construction. But some are more like the sea turtle helpers, or people who help rescue beached whales and dolphins, actual people intervening to help out our animal friends. And that is why people are throwing puffins off cliffs in Iceland. And we'll talk about it after a quick break. If you love listening to this podcast every week and you want to show your support, that would mean a great deal to me. You can do that by becoming a Patreon member. We've got members at all levels, whether you want to pledge $1 a month or $10 a month. Just think about the value that you receive from this show. And if you like the histories and the stories that you learn about or the jokes that you hear, and if you think that they're worth it, consider signing up. For that, you get every episode ad-free and a week early, access to bonuses like the unedited videos of the guest appearances, and 20% off all merchandise. You can sign up today at patreon.com/Michael Kent. That's patreon.com/Michael Kent.
Hey, I'm Cliff Baumgardner.
And I'm Harrison Stewart.
If you're like us, you probably grew up watching the Discovery Channel classic, Mythbusters.
From rocket cars to chicken cannons, Mythbusters proved there's no question too big, too small, or too ridiculous to put to the test.
Now we're going back to rewatch the show from episode 1, and we want you to follow along. Join us as we revisit every single myth, moment, experiment, and explosion from throughout the show's legendary 14 seasons. Subscribe now so you don't miss one.
We're living through the most dynamic time in human history, and what we do as leaders matter. We are the ones that create the leverage to shift directions of our companies, our nonprofits, and our communities. As a leader or an emerging leader, please join me for a dynamic conversation with top thought leaders, academics, and executives to learn more about how to elevate your leadership. I'm Maureen Metcalf. Join us at the WCBE podcast experience at wcbe.org.
There was a time that humans used 100% organic products as healing balms and moisturizers for their skin. Well, I've partnered with an awesome company that wants to get back to those times. Fatco sells organic and responsibly made tallow-based skincare products. For centuries, humans used tallow in skin moisturizers and healing balms, but unfortunately, the topical application of these fats seemed to stop around the same time that animal fats stopped being considered part of a healthy diet. A lot of modern skincare products do more harm than good by stripping your skin of its natural oils. Let's change that. You can try them out now at fatco.com and get 15% off your order by using my promo code INTERNET. Go to theinternetsaysitstrue.com/deals for the link.
I'm John DeSando, host of Back Talk. This podcast is an extension of the long-running, award-winning movie review show, It's Movie Time. Back Talk features additional content and banter with guests about new movies. If you want more insight and information about what's playing now in theaters and online, find Back Talk at the WCBE Podcast Experience on WCBE.org. You'll be happy you did.
Iceland has the largest population of puffins in the world. 60% of worldwide puffin breeding happens in Iceland, most of them in the Westman Islands off the southwest coast. Somewhere between 8 and 10 million puffins live there. Most people will go their entire lives without ever seeing a puffin, but for people in Iceland, they're common. Even so, they're classified as a vulnerable species because climate change and human encroachment has threatened their habitat. On top of that, overfishing has lessened their available food sources. And speaking of food sources, there are still populations in Iceland and in the Faroe Islands where it's a cultural tradition to hunt puffins. For these people, puffins are actually a food source. This happens primarily in coastal communities, but in some areas, puffin meat is considered a delicacy. They also used to be hunted for their feathers, but this is pretty rare in modern times. Because of this and a slowly dwindling population, hunting bans are starting to be put into place where the puffin numbers are dropping significantly, like Iceland's Westman Islands, where they're experiencing something like a 70% decline in population since the 90s. This is a huge red flag. Puffins mate for life and only produce 1 egg per season, so rebuilding the population can be slow work. One of the culprits of the declining population is the city lights. Now, I mentioned earlier that human light pollution has disrupted the hatching behavior of sea turtles. After they're born on shore, it's innate for them to crawl toward the moonlight on the sea, and the same is true for the Atlantic puffin. Once a puffin hatchling, referred to as the adorable name Puffling, is able to fly, which is like 6 to 8 weeks, they join their colony by following the moonlight, which leads them to the sea. City lights, like the lights of Vestmannaeyjar in the Westman Islands, have confused the pufflings and caused them to become lost from their colonies. This is where humans have stepped in to help. In a practice that occurs between late August and the end of September, residents of the Westman Islands and a few other places in Iceland go on the hunt for baby puffins in order to help them in their journey to the sea. People will venture out in the middle of the night to find the pufflings. They can usually only be found between 9 p.m. and 3 a.m. and grab them, putting them in a cardboard box until the morning. The residents have been instructed to visit a website where they can enter the size and weight of the pufflings for tracking. This puffin napping seems cruel at first, but it's for the good of the young birds. These are pufflings that they're finding in the city, already lost. As the city lights have confused them, people were seeing lost pufflings wander the opposite direction of their colonies because their instincts were completely hijacked. It's important that the young birds find the water, so in the morning, these captured baby puffins are taken to the tall cliffs of the Westman Islands overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. And it's there, on the cliffs, that they're chucked out off the edge, certain to be able to see the water and fly away to meet their colonies. It's become an honored tradition during what they call puffling season every year, and during those 2 months in the fall, it's common to see adults and children alike walking around with flashlights and cardboard boxes in this unusual but wholesome mission. People on a Puffling Patrol are told to wear gloves to protect from human skin oils and to protect the humans from avian flu. They'll put a little bit of grass in the bottom of the box to make the bird comfortable and to help keep the box and the rescuer clean from feces. Then in the morning, they're brought to the top of the cliff, and while some people just place the birds on the ground for them to take off on their own, most people enjoy throwing the birds in the air and watching them fly out over the ocean. By the time a young puffin is a puffling, we're talking 6 to 8 weeks old, they can already fly, and this practice of throwing them off a cliff is completely safe. In fact, it's helping to restore the shrinking puffin population. Thanks to these dedicated locals and volunteers, hundreds of lost pufflings are safely rescued and released back to sea each year, ensuring Iceland's beloved puffin population continues to thrive. The internet says it's true. It's time for Yap Yap with me and a friend. Today, I am calling a new friend, Becky Braunstein. Becky is a comedian and actor who grew up on a mountain in Alaska and now lives in an air-conditioned apartment in LA. She can be seen on Shrill on Hulu, Chad on TBS, Trinkets on Netflix, and has a special on Unprotected Sets on MGM+. What is going on, Becky? Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. You know, just another day in LA. The smoke is almost gone, I would say.
Is that right? Now, I'm sure that you had friends and acquaintances who were affected by that. Hopefully you're doing okay and able to, I guess, still stay out there and not have to evacuate and stuff?
Yeah, definitely. Who would have thought living in the middle of the city would be the safe place to be in LA? But yeah, I've had friends whose houses burned down. I've had people had to evacuate, still don't know whether they can go back, kind of thing. But I was very lucky to be out of the fire path. It got a little bit close there with the fire in the hills, but not quite. So I'm very grateful.
Yeah, I was, from following along best I could because I have a lot of friends out there as well, and we were really started to become concerned with the one on the hills because, that's the one that it starts to, affect what the average tourist has seen. You know what I mean?
Yep.
The average tourist hasn't been out to the Palisades or out Altadena or any of those places.
Sure.
But when you start talking about and the Magic Castle, I'm a magician by trade, and the Magic Castle, when you started seeing photos of the glowing sky behind the Magic Castle, we're like, oh, this is where people are. You know what I mean? It's it made it feel real. What an awful tragedy. But you're from a place where fires are forest fires probably not a thing up in the mountains of Alaska.
It is a thing up there, but it's usually so far away from where the people live that you'd never even find out about it until, it's sort of under control. But yeah, I don't even remember when we last had a major wildfire that, put a lot of smoke in the air in Alaska. But I also lived in Portland, Oregon for about 12 years, and we had some scorchers, man. There was some apocalyptic, wow, can't breathe style stuff going on there.
Yeah. And when there are forest fires in Portland, it's just the whole city gets high, which is kind of fun.
It's just which is not different.
A giant contact buzz from everyone. I've been to a couple different places in Alaska, and I will say that everything is far away from where the people are. From my experience.
That is all true. Yeah, that I can't argue with that. That's very true. Yeah, and I lived on a mountain 5.5 miles up a mountain, where it's just you forget that other people exist. You're just sort of like out in the middle of nowhere. And man, if there was a fire up there, God help us. But
yeah,
no, they're ready for that sort of thing in Alaska. They're very prepared.
Last year, I did a few shows near Fairbanks, and I just couldn't believe how sparse everything was. Like,
yeah.
You can just see for miles and miles and miles, and there's nothing, which is very different than the average. Most people, if they've been to Alaska, they've been there on a cruise and in the Inner Passage, and it's beautiful, and there's stuff to see everywhere. But Fairbanks, it's like there's not anything to see. It's just land, just forever, just land.
Fairbanks is hardcore. That's where it gets, really cold in the winter and hot in the summer. And it's just my best friend went to college in Fairbanks, and they had the school has underground tunnels so people can get between buildings, because otherwise it's so cold that they can't be outside. Like, it's intense up there.
It's crazy. I was there on the last week of their summer, and it was 40 degrees, and people were wearing shorts. I was like, this is crazy. I couldn't believe it. Well, Becky, thanks for coming on. I'm doing a new segment on the show where I ask my guests to give me a fact that they think maybe I have not heard about. Can you tell me a true fact that you think there's little chance I've heard before?
I would bet my life you have not heard about this.
Okay.
So, all right. So, the background, I do an animated history comedy series on YouTube, and if TikTok still exists, it's also on there. But so one of these stories led me down quite a Wikipedia rabbit hole, and I learned that so do you know what like an oil derrick is?
Yeah.
You've heard of that? Like a derrick, right? Where did that word come from? Well, I'll tell you. Back in the 1600s or something, I'm not good with dates, there was a guy who was an executioner in Elizabethan England who was the executioner who chopped off the head of the last person to be executed in the Tower of London. That unlucky person was Robert Devereux, the second Earl of Essex, who had a fascinating story, a whole drama with the Queen. He sneaked into the Queen's bedroom. I talk about this in my animated history comedy thing, so you can see the whole tale. But the fact that I'm getting to is that this executioner's name was Thomas Derrick, and he was actually, so when he chopped off the Earl of Essex's head, the Earl of Essex was the person who had actually sentenced him to become an executioner, because that was indeed a punishment.
Okay.
So funnily enough, he then chopped off the head of the guy who sentenced him to be an executioner. It took 3 tries. Never mind. But this executioner, Thomas Derrick, he was like kind of an engineer. He was very like ingenious. He was coming up with like faster, smarter, better ways to chop heads off and stuff. And he built like head chopping machines and scaffolding things to hang people from, and all sorts of gnarly, awful things. But I'm sure he was very excited. And one of those things, that sort of like scaffolding, head chopping structure, was called a derrick after him, Thomas Derrick, and we still use that word today to refer to like an oil derrick. That's him.
Wow. Never heard it before. Can honestly say you have won that segment of the show.
Thank you.
Whenever you first started, and I was like, oh, it's going to be some dude named Derek, which is hilarious for like Elizabethan times.
That would be very funny.
Kind of was just his last name, I guess. I guess Devereux translates to Derek in around.
No, he was the Earl. He's the guy who got his head chopped off. It was Robert Devereux, the Earl.
Got you.
And then there was Thomas Derrick, the executioner. There's 2 dudes going on here. Mm-hmm.
I bet there was some satisfaction in killing the guy who made you kill a bunch of people.
Sure. Gotta be. Yeah.
It's like, and was he, I guess does the story follow that he was released from his serfdom at that point and like no longer had to be an executioner?
I wish I knew. My God, I would love to know that.
Because that would make it a really great movie.
Right? Yeah.
Just kind of close it all out and like, I'm finally free.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Oh God, I hope so. Yeah.
I'll have to look up that segment. Tell me what the name of the history segment is again, the animated history
So
series?
it's called Microcosmic Storytime with Becky, but that's way too long. So it's on my YouTube channel.
Okay.
There's several of them. I've got like, I don't know, four or five of them. I did the animations myself. They are incredibly janky, but in a funny way. So
Oh, good.
it's just sort of me telling history stories with like janky animation.
That's actually a lot of work, even to have
Yes.
like basic animation. It's just so much work.
Truly, it's not basic. It's just that I did it all in Photoshop, which is like not how you do animation. It's like it makes it like 20,000 times harder than it should be.
Yeah.
So it's like sort of high quality, but in a hilariously janky way. I'm very proud of it. But
That's amazing. Well, let's get into our topic for the show. And for this first question, we're going to play for a joke. So if you get it wrong, you got to tell me a joke. If you get it right, I will tell you a joke. I didn't look for a joke this week, and so today, we did this last week too. We'll just have you, if you get this one right, we'll have you pick a page of 1 to 500, and I'll just tell a joke. Sometimes we have to hunt a little bit to find one that's not racist, misogynist, otherwise problematic, because these are old. But for the first question, that's it. So here's the question. In Iceland, we're talking about Iceland, puffins, the cute little puffin birds, are being threatened by human activity. Which one of these things are people doing to help the young puffin population? One of these is true. A, they're throwing them off cliffs. B, they're feeding them fast food. Or C, they're putting tiny helmets on them.
I feel like A and B would be hilarious, but I'm drawn to C. I think tiny helmets is a great thing that like Icelanders would definitely do because they're creative people.
They are creative people. However, the answer is A, they're throwing them off cliffs.
Why?
So, have you ever heard of the sea turtle thing where like sea turtles get distracted by light and so people have to like usher them toward the sea? Have you ever seen this? Yeah, in one of the places where I vacation, that's a thing. And people line either side of the sea turtle, they hatch in the shoreline, in the sand. And then when they come up, they have to go toward where the moonlight reflects off the water. And because of the light pollution, sometimes they go the wrong direction. So there's a line of people on either side when this is happening. And they stand there for hours waiting. And they help the sea turtles go toward the sea. And the same thing with the puffins. So when they are 6 to 8 weeks old, they call them pufflings, which is awesome. These hatchlings that are just ready to fly are flying toward the city instead of toward the ocean because of the light pollution. And people are finding them like they're, hitting windows and buildings and stuff. And so between August and September, this is a real thing. They call it Puffling Patrol. And families go out, like little kids and stuff too. They go out with flashlights in the middle of the night and cardboard boxes, and they find these pufflings, and they put them in the box. They wait till morning, and then they go off to the cliff, and they launch them. They throw them like a football into the air toward the ocean. And that's like the first time these puffins are seeing the ocean where they can meet up with the rest of their colony. And so essentially they're saving these puffins' lives by doing this.
By chucking them through the air.
Just chucking them. Yeah. Puffin chucking, as they say.
Love it.
Yeah, super funny. Do you have a joke from it can be it can be a street joke. It doesn't have to be some material.
The absolutely dumbest joke I ever wrote in my life is very short, so I think I'll do that one.
Perfect.
This is also, there's a certain age demographic cutoff here that gets this one as well. But okay, so you'd never know from everything about me that I'm actually very into hip hop music. I recently I bought a Tupac T-shirt online, but when it came in the mail, I ended up having to return it because it was too short.
Oof. So do you do that one on stage?
I have done, yes. And the sort of like, response that you get from anyone who's old enough to know who Too Short is versus the like bewilderment on the faces of the youngsters who don't know is like worth it every time. Worth it.
Absolutely amazing. So how often are you doing stand-up? Is that kind of like your main deal, or would you consider acting more of the main thing?
Ooh, the industry is in such a strange place right now that I'm not quite sure what to tell you. But I am both an actor and a stand-up and a writer, and I directed a music video, so I guess technically I'm a director now too. Acting's always kind of been my main boo, but stand-up is a great way to like get out there and talk to people and process feelings and stuff like that. Being in LA, there's no shortage of fun shows that are 1,000 miles apart from each other, and But I've got a couple of shows coming up if they have not been canceled because of
Yeah.
virus.
Yeah, it's a tough
Same
time. It's a tough time. I really laughed pretty hard at your stand-up. I watched.
Thank you.
I watched you. You had there was a 10-minute clip, and I was like, well, I don't want to watch the whole 10 minutes, but I want to like maybe
That's fair.
I want to maybe like see what you close on. And what I found was, I just kept going from the end of the last joke. I just kept going further and further back into your set, and ended up watching the whole 10 minutes. So, pretty great. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. Once again, that's Becky Braunstein talking about quesaritos and Taco Bell, which is very relatable, very funny. I finally broke down and got the McDonald's app, actually.
Did you? Oh,
yeah,
God.
I know.
That's what the man wants.
It is. Yeah. I broke down and kind of, fell victim to our robot overlords as it pertains to McDonald's. And because my thought was like, this isn't going to make the fastest fast food faster. But it totally does.
What a slogan.
It totally does. Yeah.
I get it. You don't have to interface with a person. You can but for me, it's the premeditation, as I discussed in my thesis that we listened to.
Yeah.
It's like planning ahead. I just cannot. That's un-American. That's not what we do. What are we doing?
I don't disagree with you. And the worst application of this, Columbus, where I live in Ohio, has White Castle. And White Castle have you ever had a White Castle burger?
I have. Yes, I have.
It is its own thing. If you're not from Ohio, I think probably the only time that's acceptable to try White Castle is when you can't fully taste it. And when, it's usually like 2 or 3 in the morning and you just grab it, and it's awful, but it's also wonderful. And we have 2 things in Ohio like that. The other one is called Skyline Chili, which is like a chili spaghetti thing. It's bizarre. And both of these things I love because probably purely out of nostalgia. Anyway, that's the backstory.
That's fair.
When you go to White Castle near my house, everything is AI. So you pull up to the screen and you just start talking about what you want. It's not an actual person. And it's really quite good at recognizing exactly what it is you're asking for and puts it on the thing. And then you pull around, and the only time you interface with a person is to pay for your food.
Let's cut out that person. If we can just have it be all robots and it just like the window, like conveyor belts it out to you, and there's just, let's get rid of all the jobs.
Exactly. And it's so bad. And when they first introduced it, it was horrible. It never knew what you were saying. And it was so frustrating. And I would pull around and you'd go to, eventually you would give up and you'd go to the thing and I would say to them, that is awful. Get rid of that. And they would just agree with me. Which is not what I wanted. I don't know if I wanted to fight with them or what. They're like, yeah, it's awful. We agree.
See, there's something missing. There's an X factor here that's like an interaction that's meaningful for your life. That's not happening when you're speaking to a robot or using an app.
Yeah, exactly. You can't take the humanity out of one of the worst human experiences ever, because that's the only thing that makes it, I don't know, it makes it feel like a real thing. You're going to get processed food that hasn't seen a human touching it in a very long time. Yeah.
God bless America.
Absolutely. Well, here's your next question. And for this question, we're going to play for a little baby Puffin toy, a little Puffin plushie, which I will mail to you in LA if you get this one right. Puffins are only found in 2 U.S. states. One is off the coast of Maine. Which one of these is the other? Is it A, Hawaii, B, Vermont, or C, Alaska?
That would be Alaska, Michael.
The answer is Alaska. You are correct. Alaska is home to horned puffins and tufted puffins, which nest along coastal cliffs and islands. And I'm assuming in the Aleutians is where most of those puffins are. I've never seen one in person.
Really?
Have you? Have you seen puffins?
Mm-hmm. Oh. They're lovely. They've got big old beaks, real cute. And in Alaska, there's a sort of a famous meme kind of corny thing that's everywhere, which is like a no smoking sign that says like no puffin.
Oh,
and
that's
it's just
cute.
A thing that we like a corny thing
I
up
love
there.
it.
But yeah,
I love it. I am desperate to see a puffin. I was doing shows up near where they are in Canada. Last summer, I was on a ship I was in Cape Breton and Newfoundland and that whole area up there. And we were so close, but so far. Like, I didn't have enough shore time when we went to port to actually take the tour that takes you out, because they're still way out there, away from people. I never got to do it.
Yeah.
So, well, I'll be sending you a Puffin plushie in the mail.
Yes.
You can remember this podcast forever, and possibly
Victory.
some memories from home. Question 3, we're going to play for a sticker. It's 3 inches square, and it's sticky, and it says the internet says it's true. And here is your question. Puffins have a few nicknames like clowns of the sea and sea parrots. Which one of these is the Scottish nickname for puffins? Is it A, Tammy Norries, B, white bobblers, or C, pelly flies?
I'm going with A. That sounds Scottish to me.
Tammy Norries. You are correct.
Yeah.
It is A, Tammy Norries. I made up white bobblers and pelly flies just because they sounded as ridiculous as Tammy Norries to me. In Scotland, puffins are called Tammy Norries. This may come from the Norse word tromar, which means drummer, because of the sound of their wings in flight. Apparently, they're loud flappers.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but I don't know how they get from tromar to Tammy Norries. Didn't really explain
Well,
that.
a lot of Scotch, I think.
A lot of Scotch. That's probably true. We're playing for number 4 for a souvenir from Los Angeles.
This is exhilarating.
It could also be a souvenir from Portland or a souvenir from Alaska, whatever you can find. What unique habit do puffins have that makes them stand out from most other birds? A, they can hold multiple fish in their beak at once without dropping any. B, they perform elaborate dances to attract mates. Or C, they use their beaks to dig underground tunnels for shelter.
I'm torn between A and C. I don't think they put on elaborate mating shows. You know what? I don't know. They got a big beak, but I don't know if it's got the capacity to hold multiple fish. So I'm gonna go with, they look like diggers. Those beaks look like they can dig. I'm going with C. They're excavation birds.
They do look like they can do some excavation with the beaks. However, they can hold multiple fish in their beak at once without dropping any. They hold, sometimes more than 10 fish. And it's not that they hold them like inside the beak, but when you see a picture of them doing this, you see like the ends of the fish kind of hanging out the sides of the beak. And the reason is because they have a spiny tongue and a specialized beak structure that allows them to do that. So I don't know why they do it. Maybe because I know in Iceland, their food sources are getting more scarce. So, when they find a school of fish, they need to just pick up more than one.
You got to get on that, man. A school of fish is worth 2 in the bush, That's
I think that's what they say.
I'm pretty sure that's exactly how they say it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, exactly. That's a quesarito for them. And when they see it, they need to do it when it's happening, not beforehand.
Life is so short. Strike while the iron is hot. Get a mouthful of fish and get on with your life. I have a difficult time eating ramen. So I'm thinking, man, if I had a sharp beak with catchy things, I could just, it might be easier.
I had ramen for lunch today, and I was thinking the same. I got fancy with it. My wife's cousin gave me a specialized ramen bowl for Christmas. It's like like the stoneware type bowl.
That's quite a compliment, I think.
I thought
that
so.
says, I think you have culture. Let me give you a very refined gift. I would be honored to receive that.
And then I ate store-bought ramen in it. Like a $2 pack of ramen. But it's got the thing for it holds the chopsticks in it, and I'm sitting there with the chopsticks and I don't know why I made it stickier than normal or whatever. And I was having a lot of trouble. So you're right. A spiny tongue would have helped a ton today. So,
I mean,
well, you've done very well. I think you're batting 500 on this one. You get both a puffin plushie, and what else do you get? Oh, you get a sticker also. So you get both of those things. And for question 5, it's for all the marbles. Becky, if you get it right, you're welcome back on the podcast anytime. But if you get it wrong, you're banned for life.
Oh my God. That's a lot of pressure.
This one is for all the marbles slash Atlantic Ocean fish.
Here we go.
Here's your question. This is the same question as I asked last week, but I feel like it really pertains. What has been the most beautiful destination to which you have traveled?
You know what? I have traveled to a lot of places. I have been quite far in this lovely world of ours. However, and this is going to be overly sentimental, but there is no place on earth more beautiful than the Turnagain Arm in South Central Alaska. It is it's indescribable. It's ocean as far as you can see. It runs into the sky. There's mountains on one side of you, people driving like maniacs in the middle, and then there's just ocean for years with like whales and all sorts of things, and like it's so quiet, and it's just such a lovely, beautiful place. And I'm very homesick right now, and I'm missing it, and I took it for granted when I lived there. So I'm gonna say Alaska.
That is a correct answer. Tell me about, you said it's called the Turnagain Arm?
The Turnagain Arm, yeah.
So I'm currently looking at a map. Now, is this, so this is north of like the arm that goes down into the Aleutians, yeah? Or like west of that?
Yeah, I guess so. It's like, so if you've got like, so here's, wait a minute, here's the map of Alaska, right?
Yeah.
Anchorage is right there. I lived in Eagle River, which is right above Anchorage. And then if you're going down to like towards like Girdwood or Seward, have we heard of those places? It's kind of on the drive between Anchorage and like Girdwood and Seward and all that.
Amazing.
Runs along the ocean in a way that we call that place the Turnagain Arm. But it's mind blowing. It's I can't even, pictures don't do it justice. You just have to see it. It makes you feel so small, and it's just amazing.
I've done Alaska on cruise ships, and I have been to a lot of the places, Homer, Sitka, all of these little spits of land basically that don't have anything there other than just beauty and wildlife. And Sitka and Kodiak, maybe some most beautiful places I've ever seen in my life. Just couldn't capture it with photos. And I've got some amazing photos, but just couldn't capture it. And in fact, last year when I went to Fairbanks, that's what I was expecting, because before that I'd only been coastal. And I went up there and I was like, this is not the Alaska that I remember. This looks like, Eastern Washington or something. It was just nothing there. But oh my God, the glaciers and the fjords and everything up there, it's absolutely beautiful. This sounds like a tourism commercial for Alaska. But
it's making me sad. I'm
sorry.
So homesick right now.
Well, maybe if we had a larger budget and maybe a few more Patreon people, maybe I could supply you with a trip to Alaska as one of these question stakes. But
I'll be a correspondent. We can do some street interviews and some like satellite link up.
And joining us from Turnagain Sound is Becky Braunstein interviewing a local puffin, and like that could be just amazing little segment we could add.
I think people would love that.
This has been a lot of fun. If you want to learn more about Becky Braunstein, go to beckybraunstein.com. On that website, you can even find the music video that Becky just recently directed. You can also find where to see her perform in LA and some of the projects and stuff that she's done. It's been an honor. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was an absolute delight.
That's all for this week. Thank you so much to Becky Braunstein for being my guest, and thanks to you for listening. Here's the voice of a young puffin chucker.
Thank you for listening to The Internet Says It's True. To listen to episodes ad-free and a week early, support us on Patreon. You can do that at patreon.com/Michael Kent. If you learned something just now that you didn't already know, go to the Apple Podcast app and leave us a review with 5 stars and a few words. That helps us a ton, because that's how the algorithm works. I don't know what an algorithm is, but just do it. See you next week for a brand new episode of The Internet Says It's True!
The Internet Says It's True would like to thank the Patreon subscribers whose monthly contributions help to make this show possible. Sean Brown, Joshua Endress, Dallas Ray, Bryce Swanson, Eugene Anderson, Jim and Joanne Martin, Mitch and Andrew Joseph Kemplin, and the show's official Emperor, Kick Track. The show is written and produced by me, Michael Kent. The theme song is by Finite Music Forge, and all audio clips in this episode are used for education and commentary and used under Fair Use Title 17 USC Section 107. You can listen to past episodes by searching for The Internet Says It's True wherever you get your podcasts, and you can see bonus content at patreon.com/Michael Kent.